Right, hello everyone. I'm Catherine Pitt and I work for Women in Theatre, and I was on both the artistic team and the project management team for women's work. Women in Theatre has been around for about 30 years. We're a theatre company based in Moseley. We do original and local theatre about things that matter. We usually work with groups who don't usually get as much of a voice in society. So elderly, dementia patients, health professionals, bereaved adults and children, mental health, and we also have a focus on lots of community projects and especially history projects. Last year we did a HLF project called The Chocolate Soldiers in 2014, which was also a community history project, and that was the experience of young boys and men from Birmingham who were being recruited to serve in the First World War. So this is very much a sister project to that. So women's work then is about women's contribution and efforts to the First World War, and our focus was on the small arms factory, Birmingham Small Arms Factory in Small Heath, and it was women who made gun parts. That was very much our focus, and obviously the BSA was an employer of thousands of women and girls, and this was a really fascinating idea to us. You know, there's that whole image of women in the household, vulnerable, not being out there, and all of a sudden they're being asked to make these gun parts, even though, you know, the jobs are very much unskilled still. To a certain extent it can be argued. They suddenly had this role and opportunity to take, you know, a stand in society. Our group then, we had a group of female participants that we got from across the city, and they worked with the artistic team to carry out research and then use the research to create a theatre production which we called Clocking On, which we performed at Small Heath Baptist Church on the 29th of March. There'll also be a touring exhibition that will follow this shortly, and I think I've given out a few flyers with the dates on, the first of which is actually this Monday at Small Heath Library. So I'll mention a bit about that at the end. Okay, so on our banners then, we've got the research period here. We had an inspiration day at Small Heath Library where participants could meet the artistic team, and we started to make a timeline of key events that we thought, you know, that happened during the war that we thought would be really interesting to explore and ask questions about the women. We read extracts from books, especially you can see here Gillian Adamson reading from Max Arthur's The Forgotten Voice of the Great War book with the extracts that were very important. And we also had a presentation from Dr. Chris Upton, who also got the ball rolling about women workers during World War I and what life was like for them. Especially we drew a lot of inspiration from the Canary Girls and munitions workers throughout the project, so even though they were making gun parts, we very much took inspiration from what life was like for female munitions workers. We had a relatives research day as well along with the research, and one lady came to us and she had a grandmother who had travelled all the way from New Zealand during World War I to do her bit for the war effort. But she was a very short woman and she was desperate to be an ambulance driver. So she, you know, padded her clothes up, bulked up, went into this interview, and she didn't get it at all. So she was sent to a factory in Longbridge, but that was a really fascinating experience, travelling all the way from New Zealand, you know, to do her bit because she found, you know, it was something that she had to fight for. So here then we've got the archives visit as well. We spent a day in here with Izzy doing archives training and looking through the archives, and we got to see lots of photos from the BSA and the Kynoch factories. And this was absolutely crucial for our set and costume designer Emma Thompson, because she did a mock-up of the hats and the skirts and the undergarments, and the audience got to see us actually get dressed into our work clothes during the production. And the tall factory ceilings with the lights and the crates that the women had to stand on. She did a mock-up of all that and the factory backdrop, so that was really crucial that our archive visit happened. And the creative weekend then is where we actually started to put the research into practice, and we spent a weekend at Golden Hillock Children's Centre in Small Heath, and we started to create characters based around the stories of these women that we'd read. So we all lay on like a giant piece of paper and we wrote their thoughts, feelings, created their lifestyle. So we looked at their families, even sexuality, race, because we'd read about families that had to fight during the Commonwealth. who were recruited to fight for us. And even though there might not have been necessarily women of other races in the factories, we used our artistic license to build a fuller picture as possible about the different things that were happening during the war. My character, for example, we focused on the element of homosexuality, like female relationships. You hear about soldiers who perhaps fell in love with each other at the front. We did a similar thing, but it was like just subtly alluded to that one of the female workers had perhaps fallen in love with someone. So the production then, why we called it Clocking On was because we watched a great video on the Imperial War Museum website, which many of you have probably seen, of the munitions factory workers clocking on. And that's, you can see I've put a few clocking on cards on the table, and we actually made the audience clock in with us. That was our idea, to make it a very interactive piece. So the audience were led by a canteen lady who escorted them through the clocking on process and security checks, because we read that the BSA was, you know, such a huge factory that they did employ canteen ladies to bring refreshments to the women who couldn't leave their machines because the demands of work were so great they had to keep up. So she would travel around and distribute some refreshments to the workers on the floor. And we employed a security guard, and we had a health inspector in the production, because we'd read that in certain factories throughout the country the girls had to have like regular medical inspections, as well as they had security supervisors, especially in the munitions factories, because they weren't allowed to carry, you know, sharp objects, anything that could cause an explosion and endanger everybody else, basically. We transformed the church space into the factory floor, which is where the canteen lady escorted the audience. And when we were on the factory floor, we basically did a lot of snapshots and fragments of female experience. So we did bits of monologues, bits of stylistic and naturalistic theatre techniques, because we wanted to show the hard, grueling toil, you know, the dirty nails. We were on about the toxic jaundice that the women munitions workers got, and we weren't in the munitions factory, but this was very much part of our inspiration, the dangers, the heavy machines. The canteen lady recalled an accident where one of the women had caught her arm in the machine, and, you know, the deaths that would happen. The vast experience then, we got a lot of inspiration from the female war poets especially, especially Jessie Pope's poem War Girls. You know, there's the girl who clips a ticket for the train, because we just wanted to show that even though it was very, very small, there was this steady progress that hadn't been seen before, and suddenly for this period of 4 years women just got this opportunity. And I know that sounds a very optimistic sense, but some women certainly would have felt more of a part of something and they had a purpose. At one point in the play we had a very stylistic chanting of parts of a Lee Enfield rifle, because we wanted to also document to the audience the things that the BSA made, you know, bicycles, aeroplane parts, Lewis guns, Lee Enfield rifles, and the women merged into the soldiers on the front, because we wanted to allude to the horrors that were also there, the loss of family members. They all had individual monologues detailing how they felt about losing their families. And the production culminated in almost a mini uprising and revolution on the factory floor. They'd been having a conversation about football, because one of the girls started to put a football team together, and obviously football, women's football, started to become very popular towards the end of the war, especially with the munitions girls forming teams. And the security guard shoots them down and says, no, you know what, when the men come back, that's it, you know, you're back in the households, all this is being taken away from you. And it was true, because obviously women's football was banned again in 1921. So it was this sad sense of progress that was going to be brought to nothing. But we rather liked the idea of creating like a metaphor. You know, the suffragettes had been fighting for years for women's rights, and we very much wanted the play to be a metaphor. As you can see here, very much passionate women with their suffragette banners, hoping for a better tomorrow, hoping that this wouldn't be the end of all these, you know, opportunities that they'd required. And obviously, sadly, this wasn't exactly the reality, but we liked to see it as a metaphor for what they hoped, some of them hoped would come of it. So yeah, this is a chance to say that the exhibition will actually detail a lot of our research, production materials. It will contain props, costumes, bits of set, creative writing that the participants came up with after we researched, you know, working conditions, what it was like for females, you know, trying to juggle a job as well as their family lives. So that will all be in the exhibition. So yes, any questions? Thank you very much for listening. Thank you. I should have said as well, we've also got the social media. We've had a project blog and Facebook and Twitter. And we've got a new website. So if anyone's interested, it's just Women in Theatre at Tumblr and the website. So thank you.